Hi, this is Bailey Bodie, and while I'm at work, I'm listening to the Two Trees podcast.
If the Two Trees has been a blessing to you, please leave us a review on your favorite podcatcher or visit our website, www.thetwotreespodcast.org, and click the yellow Buy Me a Coffee icon to leave a donation. And now, let's join the conversation.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Two Trees podcast. I'm John Dillon, and I am not sick like I was before. Woohoo. I am recovering. Martin also is recovering. Rose has returned from island hopping because she didn't want to risk living in a land of sickness.
I started the
Not a bad
sickness.
idea.
I'm like the original. I'm the OG of the sick ward.
Why did you do that?
I just had to be done.
It did not have to be done. It almost destroyed me.
I am the oldest person in our friend group, and I was just leading the way by
It's
getting
true.
sick
You
first.
are ancient of days.
I am.
Looking back on it, I feel like I could have survived without going through the sickness.
Yeah, I was just
I don't
happily
think it had to be
skipping
done.
through life, enjoying everything, and then
Zap.
death.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. But anyway, thank you for praying for us. The flu is past and life is good again. I don't think I'm at anywhere close to 100%, but enough to get behind a microphone and chat with you guys. But I'd like to introduce our sponsor for today. Today's episode is brought to you by...
I mean, we need to just stop and thank all of our wonderful sponsors that we've had so far.
Thank
I
you.
mean, these people have gone out on a limb
Ayo.
to give us this imaginary support of the Two Trees podcast. So we've had some doozies: Eve's Orchard, Adam's Ribs, Moses' Maps. That one was my favorite so far.
I like Moses' Maps.
But today, boy, this one will kind of hit home with you, John, because you're kind of going through the life of this individual. But this is David's Archery that is supporting this episode. David's Archery, where we sing while we sling. David's
That's
Archery,
a good one.
supporting the Two Trees podcast.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I am preaching through the life of David and Saul on Sunday. I thought you were going to say Job as a reference to getting the flu, but my life's not that bad. Everything is okay. But that's cool. David's Archery.
We're still in talks with Job about getting a sponsorship.
Yeah, I would
from him,
assume
so.
he's a hard guy to book. He's a very popular fellow.
It's coming.
I have got a podcast. Sorry,
A podcast,
I do.
you say?
Yeah, a review here from our friend OB. A B, like of the bee, not like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Just to be clear. And they say, this is a quality podcast that does not shy away from the weird things in Scripture. That is correct.
We are quality.
Yeah, and
And
we
we
do
are
not
weird.
shy away. No, we don't shy away from
Oh,
it.
yeah,
We
yeah,
are
that's
not.
what I
We're
meant.
not bringing the weirdness, pointing out the
No,
weirdness.
we're bringing the weirdness.
Definitely.
I kind of like this one. We are quality. I agree with you.
I think so. That makes me feel classier, thinking of myself as quality.
Thanks, OB.
Yeah, right.
Opie?
Good one. O''B.
Oh, like Scottish
he's
or
Irish.
Irish.
Yeah, that's why I said of the B. I
Of the
couldn't remember
bee.
what an apostrophe was called, and I was trying to cover up.
An apostrophe. A little dangly thingamabob.
Yeah.
Anyway, so chapter 4, season 4, we're bridging the culture gap between the ancient authors and a modern audience. And basically, what we've been discussing is an overflow of this idea of how ancient peoples thought of the supernatural world through the lens of the physical world. So if you wanted to go to a temple or a place that was sacred to the god, they saw it as emanating from a particular place, from a mountain or a spring or a desert, depending on what kind of a deity it was. And you could see the presence of the deity by the way that the natural world responded. So when grape juice turned into wine, they didn't just see this as a natural process of chemicals. They thought, Dionysus is at work within the grape. This is his sphere of influence. If you went to a place that was filled with mosquitoes and malaria and death and destruction, they wouldn't have just seen the connection of germs, but in their minds, the way they talked about it was, there is a spiritual being here. And so we know that there is such a thing as the germ world and that there is such a thing as chemical reactions. And so we don't talk this way anymore, but we do still recognize the existence of supernatural powers.
And I think there is a realm that we do think about this in a similar way to what they were dealing with back then. And surprise, surprise, it's the wide world of sports that we do
Oh
this.
my
But
goodness.
if you think about it, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. It's no secret to anybody that's been into my
And
house.
shareholder.
and owner of the Green Bay Packers. But when you talk about Lambeau Field, it emanates what it means to be a Green Bay Packer. There is an invisible idea behind a certain place in time and space, which is Lambeau Field, that just exudes what it means to be a Green Bay Packer. So there is still this idea ingrained in our mind that a certain place is where you need to go to really experience what it is to have this imaginary force become livelihood. And so I think there's a multitude of different ways that you can do this. There's hallowed grounds. If you go to Augusta, Georgia, to where they play the Masters, it feels different. There's a different atmosphere and a different emotional hedge that comes with that. And so sports really does reach out into this supernatural on the physical sphere world, I believe. And that just, I think, lends it back to how these guys were viewing reality, which was these imaginary, but not imaginary, invisible, but not imaginary beings.
They were viewing it as much further spread than I think the case could actually be made. But you do see in the book of Exodus that the magicians of Pharaoh are really performing dark, miraculous events. And so they were seeing these things in a very real way, like you're discussing with Augusta, Georgia. This is a sacred site to those who hold golf to a certain extent.
Right.
If you are worshiping Baal or Moloch or any Milcham, maybe, those deities were connected to specific places. And they discussed it by the way the world worked. And so it wasn't so much a scientific claim as much as it was they were using the physical world to make supernatural claims.
And I think the biggest difference in today's world, when we look at that, like through sports, it's almost like a mockery of what they were experiencing in the ancient world. We always say, like, the basketball gods allowed the underdog to win in March Madness. And that's just an idea of, like, sometimes things happen. There's upsets, especially in basketball of all sports. And yet we claim that there was some, deity that allowed the team to have more points than the other team. And there's kind of a mockery or an ironic way that we talk about it. And I think that almost hurts our ability to read the Bible in a way that these people weren't being mockery. They weren't mocking the gods. They weren't looking at it in an ironic way, like, oh, some magical thing must have happened. That's why you were able to do such a thing. That's how they lived their life. And
That's right.
They hang on it tooth and nail to the point where they were willing to worship these things to make things happen. And we don't have that same conviction when it comes to the basketball gods that they had on these people because it
to us,
affected their life.
It's a silly way of talking about chance and skill and all of those things. To them, they were talking about the actual supernatural beings themselves, who the Bible also talks about as real, authentic beings. Go ahead, Rez.
Do you think
no one
that
can see
they're-
you bidding over there, like raising a finger?
We need a paddle.
I
I'm being
would like
classy.
to have a
I'd
thought.
like to have a word.
Quality.
I was curious if you feel like their primary emotion towards the gods was one of fear or of reverence or of love.
Probably not love.
Well,
but
I mean, I would say that it's not love, but do you think there was any kind of love? I mean, humans are made to love, we are and so if they're not placing it on God, would they still have the same emotion, even if it's not reciprocated?
Kind of. Instead, the word that I would be more comfortable with is the word pride. They have a pride in the God of their city or the God of their nation. Because in a lot of ways, what we consider patriotism, and that's my brother calling me. I'll call him back later. But it was all connected through their religious life. And so are there people who loved their God? Yeah, mostly though they feared them. They respected them. They viewed them in the same way that you might love the king, but not in the sense that I have a personal relationship with him, but I have an obligation to him. And so when they were discussing their gods, they would talk about their cities, or they would talk about attributes of that deity. And when the Bible comes along, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It uses the language of the ancient world in a way that they are familiar with, but in a strikingly different way that you can't miss the messaging behind what God is doing. And so ancient cultures easily understood what God was saying, but they weren't confused saying, oh, you're just like X, Y, or Z. They looked at Israel's religion. They thought, this is not the same at all. Like the fact that God doesn't just stay on one mountain. He appears wherever he wants, on Sinai and Zion and all these different things. But you also get the fact that God is still utilizing the mountain imagery that they would have understood. The springs, those kinds of things become part of the way that God is speaking to us. And so he doesn't reinvent the wheel. The physical world becomes a way of talking about God's unseen majesty and the power. And it could function as a means for God to show his power, but it also is a way for his physical imagers to wrap their head around a really big idea. We sing the song, How Great Thou Art. His chariots of wrath, the deep thunder clouds form. We don't actually think God is riding his chariot up there, but when you watch the storms roll in, we can wrap our minds and say, God is wonderfully, beautifully huge. This is the world that he has made. And so God is not tied to one particular well or river or mountain. He is above all creation. He's the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome. And so what you're seeing here is the way that the ancient people in the Bible wove this worldview, this way of talking about God and creation throughout the rest of Scripture. And there are going to be lines that seem like throwaway lines to us, but they actually are projecting background and setting and feeling and emotions onto the scene that the text is preparing for us, where we would look at that and say, okay, I mean, it's got to happen somewhere, so it might as well happen in the sea, or it might as well happen in the river or in Egypt, whatever. All of that is communicating to the modern reader.
It's interesting because when we think of the life of Jesus, realistically, his teachings, you always think of the parables, which I believe is Jesus trying to relate to a physical being these very supernatural ideas and themes and whatnot. But when you look at the Old Testament, it seems like God was working in parables the same way, just not in a story form, the way that Jesus would tell them to the people in real life. He's using the same idea. Here's a parable of who I am, and I'm going to show who I am in a physical sense in a way that you can understand.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so it's the idea that Jesus isn't doing anything that he wasn't doing in the Old Testament. It's just more of an oral word compared to here's a real life example of something.
Yeah, the heavens really do declare the glory of God. There's a really great line or a poem by J.R.R. Tolkien called Mythopoeia, in which he talks about this in his discussions with C.S. Lewis. There's a very real sense in which, unless you are thinking of stories, you're going to misunderstand things about God. He is telling you things and using imagery. And it's important to remember that the Bible is written for you, but not to you. There is an original audience, and it's an ancient one. And so our job here this day is to try to help people when they spot weird things in the text to help them make sense of it. And the one we're going to look at today, carrying on our water imagery, some springs and that kind of a thing, we're going to talk about the sea today, the ocean itself. Israel is not famous for being a seagoing people. They are a mountain people. They didn't even really dwell much in the coastland. The Philistines were down there, and some other angry piratical type persons would visit from time to time. So they would flee to the mountains, to the highlands, because it was safe there. You could make a stand there. It was also good ground for not fishing, but for cattle and goats. So their world is that of the mountain peoples. When they start dealing with sea imagery, it's almost always creepy, scary, negative. And sometimes sea imagery, you'll be reading it and you think, man, I don't even know that he's really talking about the sea anymore. It becomes a metaphor for violence and for chaos and for all kinds of wicked things. Let's go into the book of Isaiah and take a look at this. This is Isaiah chapter 21, and we're going to do verses 1 and 2, and then we'll push on.
The oracle concerning the wilderness of the sea.
Okay, we're going to stop right there.
Of course we are.
Yeah, who is the oracle to?
It's concerning the wilderness of the sea.
I don't think of the sea as a wilderness, but Isaiah seems to have. This is an oracle, a message from God. He's proclaiming judgment on places, and he has something to say about the sea. And by connecting it here with the idea of wilderness, it's telling you, the biblical authors, when they put these things together, when they thought of the wilderness, they packed the same concepts of wilderness into the sea. And the wilderness is a place where life does not naturally happen. It is a place where humanity struggles to get by. It is a place of wild creatures. And anyone who has ever gone swimming in the ocean and felt something move against their leg knows exactly the feeling we're talking about. There is hidden stuff in there, and I don't know what it is. And so there's a danger.
Like a 4-foot tarpon swam over my foot. And it was startling, to say the least. I was like, just go away.
Just go away, creature of the deep.
Right.
I don't know what you are. So this is about the sea. Keep reading.
As whirlwinds in the Negeb sweep on, it comes from the wilderness, from a terrible land. A stern vision is told to me, the traitor betrays, and the destroyer destroys. Go up, O Elam, lay siege, O Media. All the sighing she has caused, I bring to an end.
As you read through this particular oracle about the wilderness of the sea, you're going to find something very strange. The sea is not mentioned. How can I have an oracle against the sea that happens not in the sea? Instead, what I get is it's almost like this is packaging a bigger idea for me. This is about the wilderness, about the sea, and it's talking about destroying and laying siege and bringing to an end and desert winds. The Negev is that deserty region in the south of Israel where, again, there's not much water. This is below the Dead Sea. But as you read through this and you're like, okay, where is the sea? Where is the sea? Where is the oracle going to here? And then you get to verses 9 and 10, and it gets to its point.
Fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the carved images of her gods. He has shattered to the ground. O my threshed and winnowed one, what have I heard from the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel? I announce to you.
So this is the target audience. It's not the sea, it's Babylon. And so all of a sudden, I'm going back and I'm saying, whatever group of people described this as an oracle against the sea, maybe you should have read it and called it an oracle against Babylon, until you realize that to the ancient audience, those two things were basically synonyms for each other.
You say the sea and Babylon?
The Babylon, when we think of Babylon, in my book, The Way of Eden, I use Babylon as a metaphor for describing the kingdoms of darkness. Going back to the Tower of Babel and the destruction of Israel with Nebuchadnezzar, all of those things, Babylon has become a word that means more than the physical place of Babylon. So much so that when you read the book of Revelation, there are two cities named Babylon, and they are not the same. All of a sudden, I find this word has taken on more than just the scientific reality that my culture wants to impose on it. The sea is a similar idea. Just like wilderness, it is a place, a description of the forces of chaos and death and destruction. When we talk about fallen is Babylon, you should be thinking of the book of Revelation again. This is the cry. Babylon is fallen. There's a really great hymn that talks about this. And it's a beautiful way of describing the end of the war between God and the darkness. This is not a uniquely Israelite idea. The vast majority of cultures of the Middle Eastern, Bronze Age, early Iron Age world had their stories where the sea is a depiction of chaos and death and destruction. There are monsters in the sea that have to be destroyed if the powers of life are to excel. You get creatures like Leviathan, and Behemoth is connected to this. Rahab is connected to this. You get the story of Moloch is connected to this. Not Moloch, rather, but Marduk. And all of these pictures of the pagan gods at war. And the imagery for that they would have used is that of the sea, that rolling, turbulent, something is not at peace in this piece of water. And so when an ancient person looked at a jar of grape juice that is fermenting and turning into wine, they saw the power of their God at work in the fermentation process. When they saw the sea never still, always churning, they saw this as a place where the powers of chaos and darkness are at work. You can't even drink the water. It'll kill you. You drink too much of this water. And so it has the appearance of goodness, but the essence of it is that of death. And so it becomes a picture for discussing these things. And you might say, oh, well, that's just pagan imagery, except for the Bible picks it up to discuss the actual judgment, not of Marduk, but of Satan, not of these characters of other mythologies, but of the actual supernatural powers that the Bible does discuss.
Can I ask a question? Not a very well-formed one. So
those are the best kind.
This one's not, I promise. If the wilderness is considered unsafe and the sea is considered unsafe, what did they consider to be a safe place?
Zion.
But not everybody can go there.
You're right.
The entire ancient world is at risk with all of the terrible places to inhabit that they would choose to go to.
Yeah, the imagery that they typically seem to have used is that not just of Zion, but of home, of the city, behind our walls, with my people and my family and our weapons and our storehouses of water and food. If we stay here, we can live well. The further from our storehouses we get, the more deadly life is.
But if you look at the water motif, doesn't the 23rd Psalm say he leads me beside still waters?
Yep, still waters, not the kind that's churning and dangerous.
So again, the idea that it's not the water that they're afraid of, it's the fact that it won't stop moving, the fact that nobody can control it.
Something's wrong here. It
There's
becomes an
chaos
image
behind
of
it.
story. In the same way that we would say it was a dark and stormy night, is a way of bringing a setting into motion. The thing with God, though, is that he seems to be showing them, you don't actually need to stay in your storehouses. I'll lead you out of Egypt and through the wilderness, and you'll eat really well, I promise you. I'm going to take care of you. There's going to be manna. You run out of water, you don't need to dig a cistern. You just need to ask me, and I'll provide this for you. And so what God is doing is he's using the imagery of that time period to teach a transcending truth.
And I think the pushback that comes along with this, well, in today's world, Rose herself just went to the sea, if you will, and that was a vacation spot. Kristen and I, in a month, are going to go on the sea, and that's a vacation spot. It's something that we look forward to.
They're going to become pirates.
Yeah, exactly. But not this idea of this great terror or this great fear of a bad thing. We're looking forward to getting to the ocean. And so in our modern times, I feel like it's kind of hard to depict it as just a dark and stormy night because most people, especially in this region, for some reason, go to the Carolinas or to Florida to get to the ocean.
And one of the reasons we do that is because we have an abundance of food from alternate sources. If you try to plant a garden on the beach, you are going to find out pretty quickly what the sand and the wind will do to your harvest. It takes a different strategy of farming on the coast than it does in Ohio.
I think that what Martin's saying is a really good example of why it is difficult to reorient your brain in an ancient perspective, because we are not afraid of the sea. We go there for fun now. You know, there be no more dragons at the edges. Like we've pushed through all that, and now it's a place of like, you know, fun. Man.
But even though, like you said, the giant fish came by you, I mean, there's shark attacks that happen. There's jellyfish that sting you.
Yeah.
There are unknown things in this crazy thing. Even if you take the spiritualness out of it, if you got dropped in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, you ain't making it to shore. Like there is a respect and a fear of the ocean that is still around.
But we
and
don't
yet,
have a spiritual connotation attached to it. So to put ourselves in their mindset, we're like, I mean, isn't that a little ridiculous? And because what? Thank you, enlightenment, that now we just can science everything
and
to
that's
death.
really what I'm trying to push back against, because the way we talk about it is different, but not the reality of the thing we're talking about. Like, we would definitely recognize that there are supernatural beings, that there is evil in the world, and that I want God to defend me from those things.
Right.
And so when I'm talking about the evils of this world, when I pray the Lord's Prayer, deliver me from evil, I'm not asking him to deliver me from an imaginary character. I'm saying there really is a supernatural power that is opposed to me. They were saying the same thing, but the way we talk about it is going to be different. I'm going to use purely spiritual language to describe it. An ancient person would have been very comfortable using imagery of the sea to describe it. It would have felt right to them. And so when they do those things, don't think they're stupid because they're not understanding something that your culture has scientifically uncovered. You're reading literature. And literature has its own rules.
And so, John, the other pushback that I would have from the ancient perspective is that the fact that they would have people that are going out to the sea to fish.
Yep.
And they would have gotten, I mean, there's people that have went out every day and come back with food or with sustenance from the sea. So how did that not prevent them from, you know, lightening the load of what the sea was? I get the aspect, like I was going to ask the question, you answered it already. Why did they pick the sea? It's always moving. There's a chaos element. There's creatures in there that they don't know about or that are unknown. And there is a danger that comes with it. So it's easy to say like sea dangerous, sea wilderness. I get that.
Yeah, it also has a very human element of danger. The sea was the way that the raiders would come into your territory. And so if you want to be safe, stay in the mountains. As a matter of fact, the one sea that Israel does seem to have grown accustomed to is the Sea of Galilee. But let's be honest, it's not a terribly sea-ish sea. It's a lake.
But the idea that, I mean, people did utilize the sea for life.
Yep.
A lot. How did that not prevent them from changing the imagery?
Oh,
why were they still able to understand that this is a bad thing?
Even today we talk about, the sea was angry. The sea is the kind of thing that permits you to be on it, but it is never a place where humanity is at home. We will always need to come back to shore or to find a way to bring the shore out into the sea. That's what's cool about a cruise ship, is it's basically a floating mall. You have brought the earth onto the sea.
Right.
But the very nature of being at sea is to be at the mercy of forces that are far greater than any planning that I can bring to hand, because the sea is unpredictable. If it weren't unpredictable, I mean, there's a reason that some of the most superstitious people in all of history have been sailors, is because this is a place that naturally tends to lead us in thoughts like this. And the wilderness does the same thing in a different way. But it is a place where humanity does not tend towards life. Extra precautions have to be taken if you're going to survive.
Certainly.
The other reason behind this, Martin, is because humanity lived through an incredibly scarring event that we call the flood. And it's not just something that's
like the understatement of all time. A scarring event wherein everybody and everything perished, wherein,
Not
8
everything.
souls were saved.
Thank you.
Yes, a couple souls were saved, praise the Lord. But every culture just about on the planet of the ancient world had a flood myth. This was something, it's a shared trauma, if you want to think of it that way, that humanity went through. And regardless of what direction they went off with their civilization, they still had stories about the flood. And so when they think about catastrophe, they had a very ready image from their own history to talk about this, and that was when the whole earth became like the sea. Take a look at Genesis 7, verses 11 through 12.
In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights.
So there's a lot going on here. You probably already are aware of the 40 days, 40 nights, and the symbolism there. But what you see here is that the heavens and the underworld seem to have declared war upon the earth. You have the deep breaking forth onto the earth. This part is often overlooked because we want to talk about the rains. It seems that a lot of the water came from under the earth. And so there is a judgment upon mankind that comes from under the ground. When ancient peoples were, imagine for a moment that you're with a group of soldiers who have just survived a battle, and many of their friends have died in the fighting. You might see them take a wine bottle or a skin and pour out some of the wine to their fallen comrades. And the idea was, they have now descended into the underworld. Let me pour out the wine down to where they are. And so when you have things coming up out of the underworld, that's frightening. That's
the
chaos.
cave that we were talking about at Caesarea Philippi.
Same exact thing. And so they're not just wasting the booze. They're saying, this is for Billy Bob. Bless his heart. Wish he'd made it.
Nope.
How dare you insult Billy Bob?
Billy Bob is not a name that I would be pouring out.
He was a brave imaginary warrior.
You prefer Gunther?
Gunther?
I think that was the name we named the angel like 2 seasons ago.
Gunther's a good guy. And so the imagery here of judgment is connected to the idea of the floods, of the waters. The imagery kind of stuck, and it becomes a way of discussing the rebellion against the Lord. So if you want to talk about something judging the earth, you use the imagery of floodwaters that came across the land like a flood. Revelation 17 talks about Babylon as a great prostitute seated on many waters, is how it describes her.
John, I got to ask about the Genesis 7 passage. You said that it came up from the underworld. I get that. But it also says that the windows of the heavens were open. And so there was almost a raining down from that. Is that a good versus evil idea that they're meeting in the middle on earth? Or
no, it's worse than that. It's the idea of, who was upset with us? Everybody.
Both sides.
Do you know what squished us? We were destroyed from above and below, because ancient peoples viewed the underworld as the realm of the gods of the dead. And above, you had a different variety of gods. The biblical analogy is, who controls the heavens and the earth and below the earth? It's God. There is one God, and he is the King of kings, the God of gods, the Lord of all. And so even an ancient pagan would have looked at this and thought to themselves, oh, well, maybe they made an alliance against humanity. What the writers of Genesis, or the writer of Genesis, is saying is, no, it's God. He controls up and down, the living and the dead. It is all of these things all at once. And so that's an instance where the motif stays the same, but the more you think about it, you realize, oh, well, this isn't God like, dear underworld, I request your assistance on the following dates.
In fact, the reason for the flood was because of the influence of the underworld on the human beings.
Exactly right.
And so the idea that it coming up from below would be counterintuitive into what the beings of the below would want.
Yeah, the whole idea of the Rephaim, the Nephilim, and their descendants to come later, is the idea that these are rulers among the dead. The citizens of Ugarit were worshiping their fallen princes as gods, deities, and there's this idea of the shades of the dead is connected to this. And so they develop their own mythology around this, but the Bible doesn't say anything to the extent that, okay, I'm going to make you your own little independent power, and I won't have anything to do with that. The whole thing of creation, all of it belongs to God. There is not going to be a place for you. In the end, the heavens and the earth will flee away, and a new heaven and a new earth be created.
So it almost is like the flood or the action of flooding the earth is similar to the Exodus story.
Oh, yeah.
How God utilizes what they thought was controlled by their deities. The same way God says, well, you think that under the earth is controlled by those people that I've given you these other beings or
That's
these
right.
powers or whatever. I'm going to overpower them while I'm taking care of
Yeah,
you.
remember in Exodus 12 where it says God is going to bring judgment upon the gods of Egypt. It's all scholars sometimes call this a decreation. It's creation running backwards instead of destruction. Like you get this idea of God is flexing his power over all of this. The Nephilim, all of those fallen angels in Genesis 6, nothing could stop the will and power of God. The only thing that brought deliverance was Noah making a boat and the protection of God. So much so that he doesn't really steer his way through the flood. He just rides it out. And then where does he get dropped off afterwards? God places him on a mountaintop where he grows a vineyard. There is again this idea of, it isn't that Noah figured it out. He cracked the code. This is an example, an illustrating of God's power, both of the living and of the dead.
I've seen this video that's gone around the internet like 100 times in the past 2 weeks. Not that I'm on my phone that much or anything, but this idea that the Bible is very specific on what Noah was to do to build the boat. Like all these specifications of how big, how wide, how deep, how whatever. And it never tells him to build a steering wheel.
Never once.
And so that's the idea that you're talking about, where Noah just did what God was leading him to do, and then God took him to the spot where he needed to be.
That's
so
it.
That's beauty in that. And just noticing with this water stuff, I've never thought of that before. How God, I know that God brought it up from underneath and allows the water to fall from the heavens as well, but this idea that he is in control of everything.
Of all of it.
To the point where there's just total chaos. The water is a symbolism of chaos and uncontrollability. That's why Jesus walking on the water is a big deal. That's why Jesus calming the seas is such a big deal. It shows his power over chaos. But God's saying, I'm going to use the chaos and doing it in a way that only I can control.
Yeah, and that's the big jump. Like an ancient person would have been familiar with their God dealing with like a specific thing. God is demonstrating that he is unlike all these other deities that are being discussed, that their dreams, even their lies, are too small, that his reality is infinitely greater. When Israel is wandering around in the wilderness, they're not steering either. They're following the pillar wherever it goes. And for 40 years, they wander through the wilderness. There again is that 40 idea that Noah has locked in place with this flood imagery. And so it becomes almost a palette for painting ideas. And the stories that the prophets are going to use and that even Jesus himself is going to use is based on the way that people talked. They didn't get issued a textbook that said the following illustrations are permissible. You're talking about real civilizations that are defined by the people who were living then, and this is how they talked. And so rather than reading it and demanding that the Old Testament characters act in a way that a modern enlightened person would think, take a minute and ask yourself, what did they mean? Why do you have an oracle against the sea and then not talk about the sea, but talk about Babylon? It's because they're synonyms. They're doing the same thing.
I have one final question before we move on from the flood. You said it's referred to as a decreation. So in the creation story, he has the waters, the expanse above and the expanse below. And then he takes the land and separates it from the water. And this is the opposite of that. Like the land disappears into the waters, which are brought back together from above and below. What a terrifying thing for Noah and his family to see this actually happening.
Yeah, I don't think if you got on the boat and you were asking Noah, what's going on out there? People need to know. You're the interviewer on the spot. Noah wouldn't have been like, I think it's raining. I've never seen rain. Like in his mind, yeah, it's raining, but he's watching the powers of the underworld and the powers of this. He's watching the wrath of God be unleashed upon the earth. And so if your initial reaction to the flood story is purely through the lens of did it rain or not, or how much water, you're missing the supernatural setting that was present there. And the enemies that God is facing in that story, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and behold, they were fair. How much water does it take to wash away an angelic being? I wouldn't think that would be a very effective means of doing this. And there are other books, not in the Bible, but of Jewish folklore, that talk about this was also a time where God unleashed judgment in the spiritual world as well. When you read Jude and Peter, they talk about those beings being enchained during the days of Noah. And so this wasn't just bad weather. This was a supernatural event that was manifesting itself in the physical world.
The other thing that you think of when you're saying, like, if you interviewed Noah as it was happening, like the water's coming up and coming down, it's raining and whatever. But, the Bible says that God sealed the ark with his protection. So do you think Noah had a chance of falling off the boat? Like, was he ever like, I almost fell off?
I don't know what Noah was like. I like to he comes from a line of pretty impressive people. If it was me on the boat, I would be trying hard not to think about what was happening.
But there was a protection that was a supernatural protection that was put on the boat by God.
That's right.
That allowed him to get through this. So, was it just a cruise-like idea? They were just, did they look up and see the sun, or did they see the actual rain?
It depends on the amount of windows and things that they may have or may not have had. I don't know. There is a lot of things I would like to know. We can call your buddy who has his office over there by the ark, and he can get his binoculars out and tell us.
But again, it's just this idea of, like, when God is in control, which is all the time, of everything in there, he can allow you to experience life in ways that you didn't think were imaginable.
Beautiful.
And so, like, that to me is just so fun to think of this idea. Like, what was it like for Noah? Were the elephants like banging around because everything was crazy in the ark spinning around in a circle, or was it just a peaceful way because they knew God was with them?
The imagery again of the ark is, if you take the imagery, you have once again mankind surrounded by the trees and the animals of Eden. The trees here have been cut down and formed into this boat, but you have the vehicle of salvation, and mankind is being borne aloft by the branches of the trees to avoid the death that is outside the boat. You can pick at this for a very long time. And
you even have the obedience of Noah in doing something that he's told to do that will work for his salvation.
An Adam and Eve.
Right, exactly.
But even just the emotional scarring, like Noah and his family had friends. Right. And so they're going through a physical event of just complete chaos, and then an emotional event of loss of all life on earth other than themselves. Like, they needed the protection that God would bring to them throughout their entire being, mind, body, soul, everything. And God is able to provide that to them. Just think of, like, your life and how he can provide that for you in so many different aspects of everything. There's nothing that you can go through that God won't be by your side and isn't able to provide what you need.
Yeah, through what we would say the storms of life.
Yeah.
Right? The famous song, I won't get into that. But this becomes a way of discussing through poetry and through prophecy. The book of Revelation famously has a great beast, a rise up out of the sea. That's not an accident.
Sounds like Revelation 13:1, give or take?
That's exactly where it is. And he draws, that was impressive. It's in my notes. I was like, wow.
It's on the outline.
Wow. Way to go.
Coming in clutch.
So he rises up out of the sea. And that's an Old Testament motif that is taken from the book of Daniel. So let's go to the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verses 1, 2, and 3.
In the first year of Belteshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and the four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another.
And each of them is thoroughly creepy. What does he see? He sees the winds stirring the sea. The book of Revelation, again, talks about supernatural beings who are doing odd things with wind and seas. They're talking not just so much about the actual blowing of wind, but that this is a supernatural event. In Daniel's mind, what is being done is chaos is being stirred. There are unseen powers at work here, and out of the dark sea erupts monsters, creatures of darkness. And it describes these things. And then you begin to realize, oh, well, in real life, though, you're not talking about a monster. You're talking about an empire that perpetuated violence, slavery, hatred, more of the same kind of Babylonian-ish world to the future. And so it isn't that you're saying there actually is a monster dwelling in the sea. And you better watch out, because when Godzilla gets up, you better pay attention. Instead, what you're saying is that this is a way of talking about the political realities that I'm facing today. That this is not just human beings operating like normal, that there is an unseen hand guiding and propelling forward violence and hatred, that the word Babylon springs to mind, the words of the sea, it erupts from the sea, it is sent from a place.
I think there's so many different ways in our life today that we are so close to utilizing this type of imagery. Like, we will say something, like I said earlier, but it's almost like in jest or in an ironic state when you say, like, the giants of the organization, or there are no people that are twice the size of other people. They're not physical giants on there, but you can understand that there is a different level of intensity in a certain person or a certain thing. And we use that, but we don't do it in a way, I feel like we don't do it in the same way that they were.
No, we don't, because in a very real sense, they lived in the land. We live on it. I don't, even though I live in farm country, I go to Kroger's to get my stuff. I go to like Myers or Aldi's or whatever, substitute whatever grocery store happens to be near you.
Or wants to sponsor us.
Or that, yes. Adam's Ribs. Thank you very much. But I don't draw my life that way. If it doesn't rain for a while in the springtime, it doesn't really bother me that much, because my life rolls along. Now, my friends who are farmers, they start getting real anxious because their livelihood depends on this. Their ability to feed themselves. Remember, in Israel, it only really rains 2 months out of the year. You're going to get 99, 95, something like that, some imaginary very high percentile percentage of water in those 2 months. And if it doesn't rain, then you are in danger of death. It's not like you can just go down to the ocean and get some, because that water will kill you. And so when they're talking about the storms of life and the empires that rode into their towns, bringing death, destruction, and slavery, they viewed it. And when they talk about it, it's as monsters rose up out of the sea. And so this sea imagery is more than just God saying, I heard somebody one time preach this, and that's why God doesn't want you to go to the beach, because the sea is never positive in the Bible. And I remember thinking, I think you're missing the whole point of that, brother. That I can't wait to go to the beach again. The beach is an awesome place. God isn't saying, I love all the things that I made except this one. This one's bad and always will be. God is God everywhere. He can hear you just as well at sea as he can anywhere else. Go read the book of Jonah if you do not believe this. This is a fact. But you can see God telling his people what's coming through the type of language that Babylonian people were used to talking about. Daniel's visions don't sound drastically different from the kind of thing you would hear from other places. Instead, the message that he brings is drastically different than what you would get in other places. The symbolism is the same, but the message is totally different.
So the medium is the same, but the picture, the artwork is different.
Oh, that's a good way of saying it. I should have written that. I'm going to edit that, and I'm going to say that. The medium is the same.
But, you can use watercolors to create any type of art. You can use any type of art to create it. But so it's easily understood as a watercolor picture, but the final product is so vastly different that you can understand that there's a realness to it. That's what God is, the realness of creation that is there. And it's the best part is it just resonates throughout all of creation. And that's the proof from my perspective as to why this is the real true one. When you look at the picture, it makes sense throughout creation, not just in one pocket or one sphere of
right.
Of
and so this,
availability.
we know what the wind actually is. All right, we've studied science. We're aware of how this operates. That it's the the atmosphere of the earth being pushed and pulled, and all of those different things. So when the Bible talks about something stirring up the deep, these winds, and it seems to reference it to supernatural powers, is this the Bible trying to tell you how wind works? The answer is no. This is not the Bible trying to tell you how wind works. This is the Bible using a physical thing like wind, and wind is physical, is actually atoms and those kinds of things moving around. But it's using them to talk about an unseen reality in the same way that stars are not stars, and the deep is not the deep. It is a window into discussing things that we barely have words for.
And that's so interesting because we do that all the time. I mean, anytime you're having a deep conversation with somebody, you try to create an illustration that then allows them to understand the idea that's in the back of your head. That's how we operate today. And that's why there's symbolism today. That's why you see advertisements today. And so it just is intriguing to me why we can't understand how God is doing the same thing. He's utilizing something that's a physical thing to try to teach you about an unphysical thing, which is what we do today. I mentioned the Green Bay Packers, and you see the G.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big one that I would want to talk about is communion. Here is bread and wine, and yet also here is the memory. Here is what it's about.
But go to someone that's never heard about Jesus and say, hey, we're going to go to church and eat some guy's body and drink his blood. You in? Like, no, I'm running as far away from that person as possible.
It's a terrible idea, yeah.
But it's the idea and the symbolism behind it that then it kind of softens it, first and foremost, but then it allows you to really indulge into something that is greater than yourself.
And the culture that I grew up in West Virginia is a beautiful place, but it's also very suspicious of things that come from outside. There is a glorification of things that are plain old country goodness. And so things that are overtly artistic were seen kind of as threatening or too foreign to really be engaged in a deep way. And a lot of the Bible for me, I was afraid of things like that. This has to be doing something I'm comfortable with because I'm obviously right and everyone else is wrong. And so as I began to realize, well, it's not really about me being right or wrong. It's not about my culture versus your culture. What I want to do is understand what did they mean when they said that. Because that mattered a lot to me when I met people who weren't from Appalachia, that they took the time to understand my culture, that they took the time not just to make fun of me, but to understand that I'm not an idiot. I just am different than you are.
It takes a long time to understand Appalachian culture.
It's a beautiful, wonderful place. Let's go to Jeremiah 51, 11 through 13.
We'll go there directly.
Directly, yes. Except
Literally,
we're going to
directly.
do it right now, actually.
The Lord has stirred up the spirit of the kings of the Medes because his purpose concerning Babylon is to destroy it.
Did you catch the
Stirred
ocean,
up.
the stirred up? Like, is
Yeah.
that idea of the deep, as though their heart is the sea, and he's stirring it up. Who is it that's stirring it up? It's God. Keep going.
His purpose concerning Babylon is to destroy it, for that is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance for his temple. Set up a standard against the walls of Babylon and make the watch strong. Set up watchmen, prepare the ambushes, for the Lord has both planned and done what he spoke concerning the inhabitants of Babylon. O you who dwell by many waters, rich in treasures, your end has come, and the thread of your life is cut.
So here is God talking to Jeremiah about the destruction of the enemies of Israel. The ones who burned the temple will also reap what they have sown. The imagery is really beautiful. Set the watchman. The standard is leaned up against the wall. But it is God who is bringing this judgment. Did you see how it describes Babylon? Babylon who sits by many waters. Again, we'll find that in the book of Revelation. That concept of Babylon's connectivity to the waters is deep and widespread through the text. Look at Jeremiah 51, 41 through 44.
How Babylon is taken, the praise of the whole earth seized. How Babylon has become a horror among the nations. The sea has come up on Babylon. She is covered with its tumultuous waves. Her city has become a horror, a land of drought and of desert, a land in which no one dwells, and through which no son of man passes. And I will punish Bel in Babylon and take out of his mouth what he has swallowed. The nations shall no longer flow to him. The wall of Babylon has fallen.
The sea has come upon Babylon. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Babylon isn't anywhere near the sea.
It's Atlantis?
No, that is definitely near the sea. Maybe under the sea or possibly non-existent. I don't know.
Tune in next episode.
Tune in
to find
next
out.
time. Yes, we have discovered something in Ohio that you did not think would be here. No, but it's describing the sea coming against Babylon. This is the armies of Persia. This is the destruction. This is the chaos. And it's flowing up to Babylon. That is not normal. That is Genesis 7, flood ending the earth kind of flooding.
Well, it's just interesting because verse 42 says, she is covered with its tumultuous waves. Very next verse, a land of drought and of desert.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right.
I'm confused here. It's underwater and it's barren
it's a
and desert.
It goes back to what we talked about before in Isaiah 21, where you have the oracle against the wilderness of the sea, and then you find that, he's talking about Babylon. These ideas are all connected. And so even though at first it doesn't feel like they should be, they are. And not just in a physical sense. The very end of this text is interesting to me. Look at verse 44.
And I will punish Bel in Babylon and take out of his mouth what he has swallowed. The nations shall no longer flow to him. The wall of Babylon has fallen.
You should look up who Bel is sometime. I'll just tell you, it's a god. This is talking about who is this supernatural being that was wielding the power of Babylon. God says, I will drag what he has stolen out of his mouth. The idea is like that of the shepherd who has slain the lion and delivers the lamb from the jaws of this creature of the wilderness. Think David, think of the bear. Think of the monster that has gripped the innocent. This is the shepherd defending his flock. And it's not David who does it, it's God. There is a supernatural enemy here. And there are glimpses like this where you can see behind the scenes that there is something that has been wielding Babylon, and God will bring it to destruction. That's got that Psalm 82 sound to it, where it talks about God standing in the midst of the gods, holding judgment among these rebellious courtiers. And it says at the very end, arise, O God, and judge the nations, for you shall inherit the nations. What was it that they had stolen? Well, it says the nations shall no longer flow to him. The wall of Babylon has fallen. I see this most beautifully in the life of Jesus, where he confronts Satan on the mountain in the wilderness. And he says, I will give you all the nations of the earth if you'll just bow down and worship me. And Jesus responds to Satan more or less and says, no. No, I will take them from you. You will give me nothing. There is only one God who is worthy of worship. You are a spirit, but you are not what I am. Satan is a created being. There is only one God who is above all, who is like him, and that is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, mighty and awesome.